Lately, I've been trying to play games with my brother, but his PC is barely holding on. It's so old that it makes Lightning McQueen look young. Since his birthday is coming up, I decided to build him a lower end AMD system, mainly using used parts, but plans always change. I managed to get some money from my siblings and his wife to put together a $600 PC that can pretty much handle anything. With a $600 budget, let's get some parts. I have two main goals for this build. I want it to be mostly white, and I want to go with the AM4 generation. The reason why I didn't go with the AM5 is it's quite expensive. For the best value per dollar, an older generation is always the way to go. Now, it's time to rizz up Amazon. After some searching, these are the parts I ended up with. For the processor is an AMD Ryzen 7 5700X for $164. The motherboard, I picked up the B55M PG Riptide for $99. RAM is a T-Force 32 gigs clocked at 3600 MHz for $67. The case is the T03 White Mini gaming case for about 55 bucks. It's definitely on the cheaper side, but like your uncle, it gets the job done. CPU cooler is the ASUS. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'm just gonna leave it there. The M120D for 60 bucks. It looks pretty cool online with an LCD screen that shows the CPU temperature. However, some people have reported issues with it. It looks dope though, and I got it in white. So we'll see if it's actually worth the money. I also had to pick up 6 fans since the PC case does not come with any. Funny story, I ordered fans in white. They sent me 2 packages. The first package was correct, but the second one, they sent me black fans. So I returned it and requested a replacement, but they sent me another set of black fans. How hard is it to send me the right color? Even funnier, the second package was clearly labeled black fans. It's been over a month and a half and Amazon still hasn't refunded my money. This is a little outrageous, especially for being Amazon. I thought they were the best. I had enough and I ordered white fans from a different company. They're slightly different, but close enough. But enough ranting, let's move on to the used components. I picked up an RTX 2060 for 100 bucks. My buddy Polar had it laying around, so I kind of snagged it off him for pretty cheap. And for the power supply, I had a 500 watt Thermaltake laying around. For the storage, I went with 2 configurations. A boot drive is a 1TB Western Digital Blue, NVMe.2. For external storage, I picked up a 4TB Enterprise hard drive, and that's all the parts we need for this PC. So let's start gathering them up and start putting this baby together. The first thing we're going to do is take apart the case. The case has glass panels on the front and side. For the front I/O, it has 2 USB Type 2.0 ports and 1 USB Type 3 port, an audio jack, a headphone jack. You also have the front power button and reset button. To remove the front glass to get better access to the case, they made it annoyingly complicated. You have to take off the side glass and the back panel to access the single screw holding on the front piece of glass. Once you remove that single screw, the front glass just falls out. Now that we have the case fully taken apart, I have to say this thing is quite flimsy. It's definitely very cheap construction. That's kind of be expected for 55 bucks. Enough talking, let's start putting together our motherboard. When I build PCs, I always lay out all the parts that we need to install on the motherboard before putting it in the case. I do this because it's easier to have everything already on the motherboard before installing it, especially since most cases are so tight and small, it's hard to get your hands in there. And god damn, this motherboard looks good. Makes me want to smack a child. Now that we have it out, I'm going to install our processor. Every time I open up an AMD processor, I freak out. I've had so many incidents where the pins were already bent straight out of the box. I gotta love AMD's and its glorious pins. Now that we have the CPU installed on the motherboard, let's get the CPU cooler out of its box. As I unboxed the CPU cooler, I noticed how heavy it is. It even comes with a screwdriver. Yes, a freaking screwdriver. Like, what the fuck? After spending 5 frustrating hours trying to figure out the manual, I was finally able to start installing the CPU cooler. And guys, always remember to peel the cover off the back of the CPU cooler. I haven't made this mistake yet, but I know plenty of people who have. And of course, before we put the CPU cooler on the CPU, we need to apply thermal paste. Please ignore how badly I do it. They gave me a scoop and I wanted to try it out, and man, what the hell? Now that the thermal paste is applied, let's get the CPU cooler in place, put it down, and use that long, thick screwdriver to tighten the CPU cooler down. Finally, the CPU cooler is installed. Next up, let's get the RAM installed. Installing RAM is very easy. Just line up the slot, push it down, and use a bit of force to get it in. Once you get it in, it will click, indicating that the RAM is in its spot. Now that the RAM is installed, let's install the M.2. Once that's done, the next step is to install the motherboard into our case. When I install the motherboards into cases, I always push I/O shield in first. Then line up the motherboard up with the I/O shield, push it in, then start screwing it down to the case. While I was screwing it down, I realized that the motherboard overhangs the edge of the case. This is fine, but they advertise this PC case as fitting mini ATX boards, and that's what I have. Apparently, it does not fit perfectly. It looks a little goofy, but it will get the job done, and I'm just gonna have to deal with it. Now that we have all the screws in the motherboard, let's install the power supply. Unlike a normal PC case, where the power supply is at the bottom or the top, this case has the power supply in the back. So we have to flip the case around to install the power supply on the back side, behind the motherboard. Honestly, it's pretty easy, but the downside to this power supply is it has lots of extra cables. Next, we're going to install the fans. You only see me installing 3 fans in the case because I was waiting for the second set to arrive. The next day, after I was done recording, they arrived and I realized that they sent me the wrong ones. The saga keeps happening. So I have no footage of me putting the new fans in the case. That being said, the way I install the fans I currently have and the ones I'm going to get later is the airflow gets pushed out from the bottom, pulled in from the top, and pushed out from the back fan. Installing fans is quite easy. You just need to line the fans up with the holes on the case and screw them in. The last thing we're going to install is the RTX 2060. Graphic cards are quite easy to install. You just need to line them up with the PCI 16 slot and push them in. Now that we have every major component in the case, we have to do some cable management. I recommend doing this because it looks nice, plus it makes it easier down the road. I did record some footage of me doing cable management, but it took me so long. Actually, it took me longer than 5 hours to cable manage this entire PC. I don't do it very often, so it definitely took me longer than it should have. Plus, this case really doesn't have any room to move around. That being said, we have the computer completely assembled and cable managed. It looks absolutely insane. This build turned out very well. The contrast between the white fans and the white CPU cooler against the black graphic card and motherboard really makes it pop. I'm very happy how this turned out. Now it's time to install some software. I want to talk about the CPU cooler software. It's from a Chinese company, so my expectations weren't very high. After getting the software installed, it didn't work at first at all. I restarted the PC, reopened the software, and it started working and displayed the current temperature on the screen. But after I closed the software, it reset it back to 27 degrees Celsius. You have to keep the application currently running in the background to display the correct temperature on the LCD screen, which is quite annoying. I'm like, what's the point? I should have just bought a normal CPU cooler. However, it does work very well at keeping the CPU cool during long gaming sessions. I did stress test this PC quite a bit. I did a graphic card test, a CPU test, and a RAM test. Everything was perfect. Actually, the scores were above average thanks to the amount of airflow this case allows. So I was very happy at the end. The only thing left to do is some baseline testing with a few games. I only tested 2 different games because I was on a time crunch. The first game I tested was CS2. It played very well on high settings, getting around 200 plus frames and performing great. The second game I tried was the finals. During combat, I was getting about 85 frames, but while I was running across the landscape, I was getting over 100 frames plus. So I think this is a pretty good gaming PC, especially considering all the settings were on high. I think this build turned out pretty good, especially for a white theme build. I remember when I built my first PC, white components used to cost outrageous prices just for the color. But now we live in an era where it doesn't really matter anymore, and that's great. So now you can build any theme you want. White, black, blue. Oh, you can't really find blue parts. I wish you could. That being said, I want to talk more about my brother's original computer that we're going to be replacing with this one. This is his custom built PC from late 2013. The same one I learned to edit on for my buddy's YouTube channel and videos like these. Back in the day, it worked great. So what's powering this old beast? It's running an i7 4700K, currently paired with a GTX 1660. Originally, it had a GT 720 he picked up at a yard sale, then he upgraded to a brand new GTX 960, which died after a few years of video editing. He installed a 970 until upgrading to a 1660. For cooling, he used the original Cooler Master Hyper 22012 or it's 212 Evo CPU cooler, which is barely holding on. At some point, the fan died and he replaced it with a Corsair fan he had already in the case. While I was recording some B-roll, I noticed that the CPU cooler was actually mounted crooked. The case is a Thermaltake Chaser A31. Also, the front fans of this case are currently zip tied in place. So props to him for that. As for the motherboard, it's an Asrock Z97 OC, which causes him a lot of problems like randomly turning on. It actually is his second motherboard, as the original Gigabyte Z87 stopped reading the RAM about 4 years ago into its life. Originally, the computer was a Hackintosh, dual booting Windows and Mac OS. The compatibility was lost when he changed to the Asrock board. The original build with the GTX 960 cost around $1,100, with upgrades over the years were probably closer to $1,800 and lasted 11 years. I'll say this computer has definitely been worth it, but it's way overdue for an upgrade. Now he's gonna have the system I built for him, so let's break down the cost of the PC I built. The CPU, $164. The motherboard, $99. The RAM, $67. The case, $55. The graphic card, $100. The CPU cooler, $60. The power supply, $30. The M.2, $42. I actually got that on clearance from Walmart. Pretty good deal. 6 fans for $60 and a 4TB hard drive for $20 I picked up from, well, it's an enterprise drive. So in total, including the parts I already had and what I could get used or brand new, this PC ran me about $655. I think that's a complete steal. This thing is an absolute beast, being able to run games at high settings and still getting over 100 FPS across the games. There are a few things we could have done to bring down the price, like opting for different fans, a different case, or a more budget-friendly motherboard. We could have also gone with a AMD Ryzen 5 CPU, but since I had some extra cash and wanted this computer to actually last for more than a couple of years, I went with a slightly better processor. He can still upgrade the processor and graphic card later on during its lifespan. With that said, I think I'm going to end the video here. If you guys found this video interesting or want to build something similar, you can follow the guide or use the parts already bought. I know this case is no longer being sold, so you might have to find something different, but I'll try my best and link something similar in the description. But that being said, I think we're going to end the video here. Hope you guys have a good one.